What's up, guys? First of all, I want to say just if you have a decent vehicle to drive in the business that you work for as a technician, be grateful. Be extremely grateful because it could be a lot worse. When I first started for a company, um, one of the vehicles that I had was my vehicle, right? It would not go over 60 mile per hour. It probably had 350,000 miles on it. Just horrible condition. Every time it rained, if I hit a puddle, I don't know if there was a crack in the distributor or what, but every time I hit a puddle, it would stall out on me. And I'd have to literally sit there and wait for like an hour, hour and a half. And then it would start right up and be fine again. But be grateful for the vehicle you have if it's not that bad in that type of condition. And I wanted to tell you about that vehicle because in a story that I'm going to tell you here in a minute, I had another vehicle that had an issue, and it wasn't nearly as crappy of a vehicle, but it failed me at the wrong time. So I was a young technician, and I go into this house, and I've read the customer description of what's happening, and I'm immediately thinking in my mind, it's probably low on refrigerant. So I got my gauges, I flip the system on, I run outside, check it, I find that it's low, probably 2 or 3 pounds. I go inside, change the filter, and get my leak detector. I took my leak detector in with me, go all over the coil. I cannot find a darn leak. The only leak I could find was out in the Schrader, and it was irreparable. Like you'd have to replace the service port to be able to fix the problem. And so anyhow, that's not the problem. Like, oh, that's not the problem. I was able to diagnose it and everything, but the problem was looking at this system, I thought it was way older than what it actually was. And I made a stupid comment to the customer about how old the system is and they might want to think about upgrading it. And the system was only like 7 years old, which blew my mind because I'd never seen a system like this with this style and design because it literally looked older than what it was. So I somehow piss her off. Like, I don't know what else was going on in her life, but whatever I did, I made her screaming mad because I thought that the system was older. And I didn't say it in a mean way or anything, but she flips out on me. And I said, well, I'll go outside and just make sure and see how old it is. And that's when I found out it was only 7 years old. But by the time I get back in the house, she's already on the phone with my boss. And she's screaming at my boss about this young punk kid because you got to understand, even at 30 years old, I look like I'm 17 or something, which is really tough if you've dealt with that as being a technician, a young technician. It's really tough to deal with customers because they're constantly asking you how long you've been doing this. And so you've got to be able to, state with confidence how long you've been doing it, or throw some knowledge at them that kind of blows their mind so they can begin to trust you and you can build that rapport with them. Because just looking young can be a great disadvantage for technicians, especially young technicians. But also technicians that just look young, even though you're not young and you've been doing this for 12 years, you got a baby face like mine. So anyhow, she's on the phone with my boss and she is screaming and yelling, and I wound up saying something. She's cussing at me, and so I cussed back as I slammed the door and get in my truck to leave. Now, the problem is my ignition, my key was worn out, and I would, every third or fourth time I jumped in my vehicle, I slide my key in, and the ignition, it would not engage to allow the ignition to turn over. This was one of those times. I'm literally sitting in the driveway trying to get my truck started so I can get the hell out of there, so I don't get attacked or something. Thankfully, the customer never came out, and eventually I was able to, much to my relief, get my vehicle started and get out of there. I get back to the shop and my boss is like, yeah, I don't know what happened there. When she called me, I literally asked her, what else is going on in your life? Because we weren't trying to offend you in any way, shape, or form. I was a good technician. I was raised with manners and stuff. I didn't mean to offend anybody, but the gal never shared that with my boss. And so that's one story. Another story is I was driving. It was like 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, early years in my business. You know, and I was a technician. I was still a technician. I was not a business owner. I'd created a job for myself. And so if you are that person and you've only created a job for yourself and you're working for the worst boss ever, which is yourself, then if you want to grow your business, be sure to check out the links that I leave in the description below. But driving down the highway, get a call from a guy who owns a bunch of rentals, and I had done work for him before on several of those rentals, and he says, hey, I got a problem at this address. And I said, hey, I'm literally like 1 mile from the exit, and when I get off on this exit, I can be at that house in like 2 minutes. And so so he's like, oh, that's so awesome. Thank you so much. So I get there, and it's a piece of crap because it's a rental, and a lot of the landlords, not all of them, but a lot of them are extremely cheap. They always want the bare minimum. But I do a thorough job on this, and I was heading to my next call, my last call, which was clear on the other side of town. He just caught me at a great time, so I pull off, get in there, and the evaporator coil was filthy, like complete mat on the evaporator coil. I cleaned that. The outdoor unit was covered in cottonwood. I cleaned that. The run capacitor had failed. And I think, yeah, that was it. The run capacitor had failed. Filter was dirty. I did like a wham bam maintenance on this thing. Very thorough, but I was hustling the whole call. So I was done in about 45 minutes to do all of this. Now the coil, in my defense, the coil was very easy to access. It was a very old system, and so I was able to access the coil really quickly and clean it. Or that would have taken me longer than 45 minutes. But I do everything, and I'm like hustling, like, you know, rolling up my hose. And, you know, back then we didn't have these, those stretchy hoses that everyone's using now. Those are awesome. Like, that saves you so much time, you don't even get it. I was an expert at rolling up. I'm still an expert at coiling up a hose, like a regular hose. So anyhow, because I've done it thousands of times, pulling my hose, because every single call I go to, I look at it like it's a maintenance, because there's going to be maintenance issues. Now, knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't have done that without charging extra for that stuff. Or I would have made a detailed list on what needs to happen to get this thing up to speed. But the industry's changed a lot. There's no doubt in the last 12, 15 years, the industry has changed tremendously from what it used to be. So anyhow, I do this call, I kick ass on it, and I get it all done. I get this thing up and running. I think I had to add a pound or two of refrigerant also. Not a ton, but a little bit of refrigerant. And now this thing is cooling the best it can. Probably the best it's been cooling in the last 2 or 3 years, because it hadn't been cleaned before, because of course, he was a landlord. He didn't have me perform regular maintenance on his stuff. So I get done with that, and this is a story where it wasn't direct interaction with the customer. It was when I sent him the bill. I sent him the bill, and the run capacitor I charged, the whole entire bill was like $150, which I'm ashamed of because I just didn't understand business. I was not charging enough back then. And this was, you gotta understand, this was 14 years ago. So times have changed quite a bit. Hourly rates have changed quite a bit. What it costs to run a business has changed quite a bit. But I did all this stuff, and he sends me back a check. He did pay it, but he also sends me a printout of Amazon, of his Amazon screenshot or whatever that shows. So he sends me this printout that he got from Amazon that shows a run capacitor for like $20. And after that, I really didn't, I didn't respond. I didn't do anything, but this was the beginning where I started to really notice this mentality of people looking stuff up online. And that was many years ago. So now it's very prevalent, and it happens all the time. So I share that story because that's a good example of there's some people you just don't want to do business with, period. It was a $150 bill. It was 8 o'clock at night. I was there in like 3 minutes of him calling. Now you couldn't even get somebody in the driveway for less than $150, let alone do everything that I did and hustled and worked my tail off for him. So thankfully, this guy, I hardly did any more work for him. Another crazy customer tale. I'll talk about a recent one. So there's this guy, we went out and we changed his thermostat, And the thermostat he thought was way more than what it should have been. I mean, he can go get a $30 thermostat from Walmart and have the same thing. Well, I explained to him that and he went straight to, yeah, I'm not going to say that. But anyhow, I got his complaint. He wound up showing up in my office, comes into my office. Next thing I know, I'm face to face, and he's pissed off. And he's like, yeah, I can go get this thermostat for a lot less money somewhere else. So, and I just said, okay, and the bill was like $300, something like that. And I said, okay, well, what do you think would be fair on this? And he said, I don't know, maybe like 200. I said, done. I'll give you a check for, I'll write you a check for the difference. And as long as does that sound fair? And he was like, yeah, that's fine. I appreciate that. And so sometimes you got to be aware whenever you're dealing with a pricing issue with a customer, you got to ask. Like if he told me, well, I think it should only been $50. Well, he knows in his mind, he would have known that that's not fair to him or us. And so most people will be somewhat fair if you just ask them. Just depends on what type of people they are. This guy was a decent guy. He just felt that he paid too much. So anyhow, we made it right with him, and that was that. I'm trying to think of another customer story because I've got 1,000 to talk about. Here's another one that cost us a lot of money. Some of them don't always cost you a lot of money. You know, like the couple stories I told you, I did get paid, didn't have to give too much money back, just made it right with the customer. But this particular one, I still made it right with her, but absolutely crazy. So we put in a system. It was like one of the hottest days in the middle of summer. And about a month and a half later, she calls and says, hey, you know, my air conditioner's not working. So we're like, okay, we get right out there and we find that she had one leg of power missing to her house, her entire house. So half of her house wasn't working. She just hadn't realized it yet. So we let her know. We weren't electricians. We're not going to be able to repair that, but we gave her the name of an electrician, and she was just convinced in her mind that the reason this happened is because of us. And so the electrician comes out, fixes it. Don't hear anything back from her. Obviously, he got her other leg of power, and everything's working fine now. Then she calls back in the winter, and she says, my furnace is not working. I want my money back. And so my general manager talks to her, and he's completely upset. He comes to me and says, Kelly, can you talk to this gal? Because I don't know what to say. I've done everything that I know what to say, and she's just not listening. So I get on the phone with her, and same thing. I want my money back. You got to come tear this thing out. You know, whatever you guys did, just not working. So I said, okay. Will you at least allow me to come over and see if I can't get you some heat? It was a cold morning. And she said, yeah, go ahead. So I come over, and what I believe was the issue was the flue pipe. This was a modular home, and I believe the flue pipe where we turned on those mobile home 90s, if you don't get just a tiny bit of slope on that little tiny bit of travel between where it comes out of the furnace, turns, and then goes up into the roof jack kit, because you have to buy the kit for those on the 90% centers. It was just carrying just a little bit of water, and that was causing the pressure switch to not make all the time. So I get over there, and I just turn the system on. It literally runs for like an hour and a half while I'm trying to figure out what's going on. It runs for an hour and a half, brings the temperature up. I went ahead and cranked it up and just overheated the whole house just to see if I could get it to mess up, and I never could get it to mess up. But I tried to make some adjustments in that flue, pushed it up a little bit, went on the roof, took the screws out, shoved it up and screwed it back in there, got it hung, got it doing better. Or I may have like put a strap down low under the 90, where the first 90 that turns, where it comes back towards the furnace. And so, but her mind was made up. Boy, there was nothing I could do. And so we had it in our agreement that, 1 year test drive. If you're not happy within that first year, not happy with our service, we will refund 100% of your money and remove the system. And we'll even schedule it a time when you hire your other company to come out and replace it. We'll come out that morning and tear it out, no charge, give you a check back, and then you can have your new system installed. That way you don't have to be down, like whatever it took to make it right. So we do that, and while my guys are out there tearing out the system, she had heat and no problems for the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks after I left that day. And however long it took her, I don't remember, but it was at least 2 weeks where she hired another contractor to come out. She told me the day, and I said, okay, we'll be out that first thing that morning. And so we tear it out, and while my guys are there tearing it out, she decides to not even be present. She had her sister come over and be present. And so while we're there, she calls her sister, and her sister's on the phone, and my guys are working all around there. And she's like, I don't know why you're doing this. This is so ridiculous. These guys are so nice. They're doing a great job. This is so ridiculous. Like, her sister was upset with her because she was being so unreasonable about this entire situation. So, but we held to our word, removed the system, gave her a check back, and that was the last time I talked with that gal. And so the moral of the story is you're going to have unreasonable people. You're going to have people that you cannot get along with, you cannot make happy for whatever reason. Once it's decided in their mind, and then they start justifying it to themselves why they're right. And you just can't stop that. You cannot stop that once that's happened. So all you can do is all you can do. And as long as you're doing all you can do, it's enough. Always be as fair as you can be. Always have as much integrity as you possibly can. Always be honest. Just honesty never fails, no matter what it is. So be honest, have integrity. Do your best to do the right thing within your power, and you'll be fine. But that's just a few stories about customers. Like I said, I've probably got 15 more, 20 more, 30 more. I just have to really sit down and think about it. So I'm sure you guys have some stories. Share them in the comments below if you can, in a paragraph or two. I'm interested to hear, and how you dealt with it, because that's the thing, is every time we walk away from one of those types of situations, we have to reflect and say, what were the red flags? Like, why? So that way, next time if it happens, I can literally ensure that I figure that out. And if I spot it, I'm gonna, like, the price is gonna double because I don't want to do the work, or I'm just not gonna even give a bid. So, you know, there's no bad situation can happen to you, whether you're a technician or a business owner, without something good coming of it. But you just got to find it. And sometimes you got to dig pretty deep because you felt like you did everything right and you did everything honest. But it's there. Just find out what it is, and that way you can avoid it next time. So talk to you later, guys. Go make money. Boom.